Welcome to the Merry Makers Handmade Christmas. This is going to be my series for this Christmas season. I'm going to give you all sorts of ideas for easy handmade gifts to add into your Christmas stockings or your Christmas baskets. If you do that every year, I always make everybody like a big gift basket with a whole bunch of handmade items in it. Last year it was like a whole bunch of stuff that we made on our farm: canned goods, sourdough bread, eggs our chickens laid, all that kind of stuff. And so these are going to be the first in that series for our Merry Makers Handmade Christmas. Today, I'm going to show you how to make these really easy and super quick scrap busting hand warmers. And I like to say that they're hand and feet warmers because if you're like me and you always have cold feet, you can warm these up and stick them under the blankets to put your feet on to warm them up after a day out in the cold. Now, I live in Southeast Texas near Galveston. So we might get a cold day maybe 3-4 days out of the year, except for last year we had a big freeze. So we had like a week long of it being really, really cold. And so these are going to be perfect for that cold season coming up because I know a lot of you in mid to late November are already dealing with super cold weather. So hi, Nikki. So Mickey's going to join us today in the studio, and we're going to whip these guys up. I made 4 of these in about 15 minutes total. So these are super easy, super quick, and they will use up all your scraps. Probably the best fabric to use for these is going to be flannel. It's going to keep your rice filling warmer longer. But you could use quilter's cotton. Like I've got a big stash over there. Quilter's cotton. It just needs to be 100% cotton fabric and 100% cotton thread, because if you put it in the microwave and it's polyester, it's probably going to melt. So be sure you grab up all your supplies. I'll show you what you need next, and join me at the sewing machine to make this super quick and easy stocking stuffer. Okay, the supplies that you're going to need for your cute little reusable hand warmers are going to be some sort of flannel fabric. This is to make it nice and cozy. You could also use quilter's cotton if you want to, but I think the flannel is going to make it really nice and cozy. So I've got some here with like galaxy cats, and I've got some just plain old gray, so we're going to make a couple of them. You're going to need my PDF pattern that's going to come with a little template for the heart-shaped one and for the square one. You're going to need some matching thread. You're going to need all of your usual things for sewing: your sewing machine, pins or clips, if you like to use those, some sort of marking pen for your fabric. This one is an air erasing marker, but I do like the friction pens. They erase with heat from your iron. Like I said, matching thread. You're going to need some scissors to cut them out, so your fabric scissors, but you're also going to need what's called pinking shears. And what pinking shears are, if you don't have a set, they're great for finishing seams. If you don't have like a serger to finish your seams, or if you don't want to zigzag your seams, you can always cut them with pinking shears because they cut on I don't know if you can see that. No, I don't know if that's helping or not, but they cut with a little zigzag design on them. And what that does is it cuts your fabric at a bias going both ways, and so it doesn't fray. And so that will help with your seam allowances if you're making something else and you don't want them to fray and you don't want to zigzag them, or you don't have a serger. Pinking shears are a lifesaver. This is kind of like the old-timey way to do seam allowances. But for this one, we're going to be cutting the edges with pinking shears to make them decorative. You're going to need some rice because that's what's going to go on the inside of your little hand warmers. And then you're going to need a funnel to put the rice into your hand warmers. But if you don't have a funnel, you can make one out of a piece of paper. So we're going to use that also. So that's all the supplies that you're going to need to make your easy peasy little hand warmers for some Christmas gifts. So we're going to add these into a bunch of Christmas baskets. The last few years, I've decided that I'm just going to do some handmade gifts in a gift basket for all of my friends and family. And that way I can like kind of bulk make presents. And last year we did a farm fresh gift basket where they had like food that I've canned, sourdough bread, eggs from our chickens, all that kind of stuff. So this year we're going to make some handmade gifts to throw in those baskets. So I thought little reusable hand warmers will just be the ticket. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out my pattern pieces here. So In order to do that, clear everything out of the way, I'm going to take my flannel fabric and I'm going to draw on the wrong side. So this is just some leftover flannel that I had from a project from years ago now, and it's just been sitting here. So I thought, you know what, why not use this flannel up? So I'm going to put mine with the right sides together. So the pretty side touching the pretty side. So right sides together. So we're going to see the back of the fabric. And you can see this is something just left over from a previous project. This will take scraps of fabric. So it's a great scrap buster. You don't really need to go buy. If you have a stash like mine, you can just use up what you have. So I'm just going to put my little pattern piece on here. I'm going to trace this with my air erasing marker, and then I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to cut out several of them so you can batch make these. They take just a few minutes to make. So really, you could make a whole bunch of them in one sitting. So let me trace these out and get all these cut out, and then I'll meet you over at the sewing machine. Okay, before we start sewing, we need to mark where we're going to leave our opening, because you need to leave an opening on the side in order to be able to fill your rice into your little hot pack. So I'm going to do this with the wrong side of the fabric together, because we're going to cut our seam allowance with pinking shears to make it decorative. So we need our seam allowance on the outside. So I'm just going to line these up with the right side out. And then I'm going to mark a little spot on the side, on the straight side, about 1 inch to 1.5 inches long. And I'm not going to sew right there. So we're going to leave this little part open right here. And the pattern, when you print it out, this is my prototype template, but when you print it out, it'll have a little mark on there for you to use to mark your opening with. So let me just mark that. You can't really see the purple on the purple fabric, but that's okay. So I've already threaded at my sewing machine. I've got my stitch length set at a 3.5, and we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we're going to start at one mark and sew all the way around to the other mark and back stitch at the beginning and the end of both of those marks. So I have my my seam allowance guide. This is like a quilting guide. You can get these for any machine. A lot of machines now come with them, but it's really helpful so that you can keep your seam allowance straight. So I'm just going to start at this bottom mark down here, which you almost cannot even see anymore. And I'm going to line up the edge of my fabric with my seam guide. If you don't have one of these, most machines come with these lines on here. So you'll find the 1/4 inch seam allowance line and just line up your fabric with that. Now, if you're a beginner, when you're sewing, you don't watch where the needle is going up and down. You watch your edge of the fabric of where it's lined up with, and that's going to give you a nice straight seam allowance. So we're just going to back stitch to lock in our stitches at the beginning, and then we're going to go down to the point and stop about 1/4 inch away from this edge. Put your needle down, lift up your presser foot, pivot your fabric, and line that edge up with your wherever your seam allowance guide is. Now, if you're not quite there, you may need to go one more stitch, but we're pretty close. So we're going to pivot to make a nice sharp corner, and then we're just going to keep this lined up with our seam allowance guide and go all the way around to that other mark. Now, when you're sewing around curves, you want to go slow and go like one stitch at a time, gooching your fabric around. See, now I don't have it lined up with this anymore, but I'm watching this line up here to make sure my fabric is lined up with that 1/4 inch seam line right there. So you might have to move this out of the way if you feel like it's in your way. So when we get to the top of the heart, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go down. We're just under that point, put our needle down, lift up our presser foot, and pivot. That gives you a nice sharp corner. And just keep going around. When you're sewing curves, this is a good project to practice curves with. You just want to go slow, because the slower you go, the smoother your seam curve will be. And it's okay if, you know, you get a few little sharp turns in there. That's okay. This is just a quick little project. Great one to practice on. So here is our other mark so that we can leave our openings. We're going to sew up to that. And we're going to back stitch to lock in our stitches. And what that is going to do, mine has an automatic thread cutter, by the way. So what locking in your stitches is going to do is when you go to make this opening, your stitches aren't going to pull apart right here. So now you have your opening to put your rice in. But before we add our rice in, because it'll make it a little bit more difficult to trim it, I'm going to take my pinking shears and I'm going to trim the seam allowance so that they have a zigzag edge. Okay, like I said before, pinking shears, now you can see them have a zigzag when they cut. So I'm going to trim the seam allowance off just a little bit to give it a zigzagged edge. Not only is that going to make it decorative, but it's also going to make this flannel fabric not fray. Flannel doesn't generally fray too much, but if you're using a quilting cotton, you definitely want to do this. They also make pinking shears that do a scalloped edge, and I think that that would be really pretty too. So you just trim it off. And we're going to trim this little thread right here. And now we are ready to fill it up with some rice. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this whole pile, and then I will fill them all up at one time. So remember, we have that little opening there. We haven't closed it up yet. So I'm going to get these all set, and then I will show you filling it up. Okay, before I fill these, I was going to show you this. The reason why I'm trimming these after I sew the seam allowance is for this reason right here. My fabric shifted while I was sewing, and because I'm going to trim it afterwards, it will look more uniform like this. If I trimmed it with the pinking shears to start with, and then my fabric shifted, you'd be able to see that, and it would be off. So since this shifted before I trimmed it with the pinking shears, now I can clean up this edge and make it all look very uniform. So let me trim these up and then we'll fill them. All right, in order to fill them, I'm just going to use this piece of paper and roll it up into a cone shape to use as a funnel because I don't know where my funnel is. So I'm just going to do this. You can tape this if you want to. And I'm just going to stick this in the little opening right here. And then I'm going to fill this up to where it's relatively full, but I still need enough room to be able to close up that that hole. So I'm just going to scoop some rice in there and let it go into our pouch. Okay, pro tip here, ask me how I know. When you pour your rice in here, do it over your rice container. Otherwise, if you miss it or it pulls out of the edge, you'll have rice everywhere. Ask me how I know. All right, I think that is full enough. Okay, so we have this full. And now we're going to take it over to our sewing machine and we're going to just sew up this little seam right here. And then you'll have your little hand warmer. So let me finish filling all of these up. You may want to grab some clips and put a clip on that so that it doesn't spill as you're moving them around. Or you may want to just do this right next to your sewing machine, and that way you don't have to walk around with a bag full of rice. Okay, now that we've got these little guys all filled up, we're going to just stitch from where we back stitched to the other side of where we back stitched, closing up that opening. Now, it's best if you like shake all your rice down to one side and make sure you don't have any bits of rice under your needle. Because some machines that might break the needle. But you also just want to make sure that you're getting this edge lined up with your 1/4" seam allowance mark. And then I like to just stitch right over where I back stitch and do a couple little back stitches right on top of that. So those little back stitches will be in the same place. And then you just trim up all of your threads and make sure everything looks neat and tidy, and then you are done. So really, this is an easy project for beginners. It makes a great little Christmas gift to add into people's stockings or their little baskets. And it's something that you can get done in just a few minutes and with very minimal materials too. So if you have a little stash and you've got some scrap fabric, this could really be an inexpensive little way to add a nice little handmade treat to your gift baskets for Christmas or any holiday. Okay, what do we think? they turned out super cute. This is something you can make in just a few minutes. Make a whole bunch of them, add them to baskets for Christmas, or put them in the stockings. That would just be great. So it literally took me maybe, I don't know, 15 minutes tops to cut all these out and sew all 4 of these and fill them. I asked ChatGPT how long these would stay warm for, because I live in Southeast Texas and here we might get a cold snap 2 days out of the year. But I don't know. The last couple of years we've had some pretty bad freezes, but I was thinking these would be great for when we're outside doing yard work when it's cold, and like when my husband's driving the tractor or I'm working in the garden or something like that. I can just pop them in my jacket pockets to warm my hands back up. So I asked ChatGPT how long these would stay warm, and Chatty Cathy, my assistant, said that if you microwave these for anywhere from 20 to 40 seconds, that they should stay warm for about 20 to 40 minutes, depending on what fabric you use on the outside. So it said if you use something like a flannel, it's going to stay warmer longer. If you use something like a, well, hello there, kitty cat. This is Mickey. Um, if you use something a little thinner and lighter, like a quilting cotton, it's going to last maybe 15 to 20 minutes. So just long enough to get your hands warmed back up from being outside. And then I also asked, how could you rewarm this if you were away from the house? So let's say you go to your kid's football game, or I guess they don't really play soccer in the winter, but let's say a football game. How could you rewarm these? And it said to put it in front of your car heater vent. So like turn your car heater on and put this in front of the vent and warm it back up. Not sure how well that would work. So I don't really know how to rewarm these if you're out and about. So these are kind of a cozy thing for keeping warm at home. I also thought that this would make a great foot warmer too. So let's say you've been out and about all day, it's freezing cold, you come in, you're getting all snuggled up to watch a good Christmas movie or something, you got your fire going, but your feet are still cold under that fuzzy blanket. Go pop these in the microwave for about 30 seconds, and then you can put them like they used to do 100 years ago when they didn't have central heating. They would warm something like this up and put it under the blanket to put your feet on to keep your feet warm. So I thought, what a good idea, because my feet are always cold. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this little tutorial. Go whip up a whole bunch of these for your Christmas baskets or your stockings. I think they make great little stocking stuffers for the Christmas season. And as always, be sure to tag me on all social media at By the Bay Bag Co, because I would love to see what fabrics you choose to use. Be sure to tag me on all the social media at By the Bay Bag Co. And I would love to see what fabrics you choose to make all of your little projects out of. And be sure to, the cat's distracting me. Be sure to follow along, because it is the Merry Makers Handmade Christmas series here on my channel. So I'm going to be sharing for the rest of the season all sorts of handmade gifts that you could include in your Christmas gift exchanges. So anyway, be sure to hit the subscribe, the like, all that YouTube-y stuff. The algorithm really appreciates it. So anyway, I'll see you guys next week in the next video.